In order to understand what we're going to be talking about today, the latest revelations related to the Andrew Cuomo nursing home scandal, we have to understand a few concepts so we don't turn into partisan hacks related to leadership and how we judge the actions of leaders during a crisis. And the first and most obvious thing that people do not seem to get is that we never seem to judge leaders based on the information that they had at the time. We actually judge them with the information that we know in the future and how we would have reacted knowing the outcome further down the line. In this way, any politician that's in a leadership position during a crisis is almost guaranteed to fail because if they don't have the information at the time, there's no possible way that they can succeed, or they're just basically guessing, shooting in the dark. And if they're lucky, we consider them a great leader who took decisive action in this scenario that ended up yielding positive outcomes. But when you're back in the moment, when those decisions are made, there is no way through the fog of the future that that person is able to make the proper decisions.
Thank you for coming back to the show. Mom told me I had to.
Now, with that being said, there are actions from Governor Cuomo during the pandemic related to his nursing homes policy that are in fact scandalous in that at the time he should have known that they were wrong and he made poor decisions or outright criminal decisions, allegedly. And there's also a big thing that is looming overhead that people are just not talking about, even though this greatly magnified the damage that Cuomo's decision-making could actually do.
Governor Andrew Cuomo, I appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you.
I love you. I'm proud of what you're doing. I know you're working hard for your state, but no matter how hard you're working, there's always time to call Mom. She wants to hear from you. Just so you know.
Yeah, I called Mom just before I came on the show. By the way, she said I was her favorite.
She never said that.
Good news is she said you were her second favorite. Second favorite son.
Now, with all that being said, let's start at the beginning. During the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic, New York State and New York City specifically were on the front lines of the pandemic, and Governor Andrew Cuomo was faced with a crisis that a governor in this country hasn't had to face in 50 to 100 years. He had to come up with guidelines for a novel virus that we didn't really have a lot of information about, that we were only seeing on the news in terms of its impact in Italy, and he had to base his policies on basically the information that he was getting from the Italian government. Now, obviously, at the time, we knew that this virus disproportionately affected the elderly. So you can say with some certainty that it was a pretty bad call for Andrew Cuomo to decide that any elderly person with a COVID-19 diagnosis must by law be able to be readmitted to a nursing home when the virus was known, even at the time, to be highly transmissible and highly deadly to elderly people. Now, you can say this was a bad decision, and to be fair, in hindsight, it is 100% probably the worst decision that Governor Cuomo and any other governor that copied his policies made during the entire course of the pandemic. But at the time, Andrew Cuomo, like many other politicians, were concerned about hospital capacity, and nursing homes did have some capacity and capability to treat patients, which is why he wanted these people to be able to be readmitted to those nursing homes so that they could get treatment at a location and it wouldn't put so much pressure on our ICU system. Obviously, this didn't work out due to the transmissibility of the virus, due to the fact that there was just a lack of equipment to contain a virus at many of these nursing homes, and the results were 9,000 people who had COVID-19 diagnoses were discharged back into nursing homes from the hospital, and this led to the death toll of about 15,000, or around a third of the total deaths in the state of New York, just in nursing homes.
Better than me.
Only on the basketball court.
Never, don't
That's
lie.
what Pop said. That's what Pop said.
Never. He did not.
He said.
You never beat me once.
The country should
not
know.
Once.
He said Andrew
You're
has
all
tremendous
talk. All show, no
capability.
go.
He is blessed in many ways, but he's got hands like bananas and he can't play ball. Everybody knows it. Just saying.
Put the money
You're
on
doing
the
a great
table,
job,
and I'll take you out and spank you.
Now, to be clear, right now we are just in bad decision territory. We are not in anything criminal territory. We are not in anything cover-up related territory. We're just talking about a poor decision made without the hindsight that is available to us in the future by one governor in the state of New York. However, something else was occurring at the beginning of the pandemic that ended up magnifying this terrible decision, costing the lives of thousands of elderly Americans across selected states that were seeking the approval from the mainstream media. Now, if you'll remember, at the beginning of the pandemic, media figures, social media influencers, media companies, and social media companies were warning us about the scourge of potential misinformation on the internet. How misinformation available to us online was going to lead us to bad decision making and thus have unintended consequences of magnifying the destructive nature of the pandemic. And thus, social media companies introduced a series of crackdowns meant to direct people away from misinformation on the internet and direct them towards government sources and authoritative sources on the crises. Now, you could have argued at the time that the potential for misinformation, bad medical information on the internet would have caused negative consequences throughout our society. In fact, you can still argue that bad information and misinformation still causes negative consequences and magnifies the consequences of the pandemic throughout our nation. However, while you can make that case in a theoretical sense, one of the things you cannot argue against is that this coordination of media companies, multinational corporations, and social media giants ended up magnifying the negative consequences of Governor Andrew Cuomo's policies.
Last night, I was doing what I do for my family, which is make my mother's sauce. She taught me how to make the sauce, which is something that is very coveted. And she said, I can only teach he, not she, he who will carry it on best. And you will see the B-roll of me cooking. My mother called me and said, is Andrew there? I said, no, Mom, I'm all alone here out on the island with my family. And she said, where is he? And I said, he's up in Albany in the house with the big gates and the attack dog. And she said, oh, that's too bad. And I said, it's okay, Mom. I love him and I'll make sauce for him too. And she started to cry and then I said goodbye.
Now, it was pretty obvious very early on that this virus was highly contagious and it disproportionately had negative consequences, including death, for the elderly. So a policy that requires you to cram in sick people with other non-infected elderly people would lend us to believe that this would have very negative outcomes. And all over the internet, people were pointing out that Governor Cuomo's nursing home policy didn't make any sense and it had the potential to backfire. However, Governor Cuomo was an official government source. His Department of Health agreed with his assessment, and thus questioning that source on the internet was akin to spreading misinformation on social media, and those posts and articles were suppressed. On top of that, Governor Cuomo's brother, Chris Cuomo, worked at CNN. Notice how I've been playing the comedic stylings of Chris Cuomo and Andrew Cuomo on CNN during the course of the pandemic. This actually comes from a Now This highlight reel of their segments together, because this is how beloved by the mainstream media Andrew Cuomo was at the time. Conversely, Governor Ron DeSantis, who did not institute the same nursing home policy as Andrew Cuomo, was criticized viciously by the mainstream media for not following suit with Andrew Cuomo, which led people in politics who are always looking to cover their own backside to believe that the best way to get positive coverage for your state and for your job as a governor would be to imitate Andrew Cuomo's policies, including his nursing home policy. And the results of this were absolutely tragic. New Jersey, which actually has a higher death rate per capita than New York State, Pennsylvania, Michigan, along with a bunch of other Democratic states, all followed suit with Governor Cuomo's nursing home policy to disastrous results. In fact, in the state of Michigan, they were actually paying nursing homes $5,000 per patient that they accepted that had a positive diagnosis, which not only led to people who were diagnosed with COVID that were elderly being returned to their nursing homes, it actually incentivized and brought in people who were not even eligible to be in nursing homes to those nursing homes to infect their elderly population. And almost all of the states that we're talking about have insanely disproportionately high deaths in nursing homes in their states. So at this point in time, what we have is a tragic combination of factors. We have a bad decision by Governor Andrew Cuomo. Whether you believe that in the beginning it was made in good faith or not is up to you. I tend to give people the benefit of the doubt and not think that they're that malicious. They're just really dumb. But this was compounded by social media companies and mainstream media companies kowtowing to government sources and not actually questioning them because they were more interested in promoting a narrative rather than actually getting us the information and challenging power. On top of that, because most of the mainstream media is based in New York, so they have a New York East Coast bias, and they were also obsessed with nailing President Trump to the wall and propping up any opposite party figure against him, Andrew Cuomo was being pushed as a partisan weapon against President Trump. Now, I know you guys remember during the Democratic National Convention and the lead up to the Democratic National Convention, when the hashtag President Cuomo was trending all over Twitter and all over social media, because unlike the evil bad orange man, Andrew Cuomo was showing us what a real president looks and acts like. So if you're a self-serving politician, like 99% of them are, and you want it to be reported that you're doing an excellent job, it was clear and obvious that you should copy Andrew Cuomo just from the positive coverage that he received. Conversely, it was clear that you should not be seen as aligned with Trump or Ron DeSantis, because Ron DeSantis was distinctly not doing what Cuomo did, and therefore was getting the brunt of the media's negative coverage. And in fact, he is still getting that negative media coverage to this very day. So already we were queued up for disaster because we had the media, politicians, all coordinating together for political goals rather than the goals of public health. We had ignorance prevailing and biases taking over for facts, and this led us to the dire consequences. However, it actually gets even worse than that, because once it became obvious, most of us would think, that this policy was leading to a disproportionate amount of deaths of the elderly, obviously politicians would reverse course. However, that was not the case. When it came time for Andrew Cuomo to actually stand up and advise people against the mistakes that he made, he chose instead, or his administration chose instead, to push for a cover-up, because what ended up happening was New York was hiding behind the fact that out of all 50 states, New York was counting nursing home related deaths in a unique way deliberately made to skew down the number of fatalities. This is why right-wing media for almost a full year has been ahead of the curve on this and on Governor Cuomo, yet the mainstream media had been ignoring it throughout the length of the crisis. Because Andrew Cuomo had decided, or somebody in New York State government had decided, and again, New York is the only state that counted nursing home deaths this way, that if you left the premises of the nursing home and didn't actually die in the nursing home, that you would not be counted as a nursing home death. So, if you were really sick, you're on the verge of dying, an ambulance was called, you were loaded onto the ambulance, and that ambulance was in the driveway of a nursing home, you would not be recorded as a nursing home death, you would be recorded as a death en route to the hospital. Now again, this isn't really an issue except for the fact that it doesn't give us accurate information on how dangerous it is for people to be put in nursing homes when they have a positive diagnosis. Also, no other state counted their deaths like this, so this allowed New York to hide behind the fact that according to their numbers, they actually had lower nursing home deaths per capita than other states, even though they were counting it completely differently. Now, even though I'm breaking down this story in one video, it's really important for you guys to understand that this is happening over the course of months. This is months in delay of information that was crucial to other states that were copying Andrew Cuomo's policies in order to look good, where he could have put out this information and saved the lives of seniors everywhere. This was all time when the media was buttering Cuomo up and celebrating him as the guy who should be president, when they could have been questioning him and comparing and contrasting the outcomes for the elderly in New York versus Florida to realize that maybe Andrew Cuomo wasn't doing the best job. However, this was not done, and this magnified the amount of deaths that we saw with the elderly in nursing homes across the country, disproportionately in democratically governed states.
With all of this adulation that you're getting for doing your job, are you thinking about running for president? Tell the audience.
No, no,
No, you won't answer?
no. I answered. The answer is no.
No, you're not thinking about it?
Sometimes it's one word. I said no.
Have you thought about it?
No,
Are you open to thinking about it?
no,
Might you think about it at some point?
no.
How can you know what you might think about at some point right now?
Because I know what I might think about and what I won't think about. But you're a great interviewer, by the way.
Appreciate it. Learn from the best.
This is actually incredibly sick when you think about it, because what we recently found out is that this wasn't all the bumblings of idiot Democratic governors like Governor Cuomo and the mainstream media that was just looking to suck up to any Democrat that they possibly could. They knew at a certain point that they were not giving out accurate data, and they were deliberately hiding it because they were afraid of the consequences politically and possibly criminally for the state government officials involved. It was recently revealed that a top aide from Governor Cuomo privately apologized to the members of the Democratic state legislature in the state of New York for hiding numbers because they were afraid that they were going to make them vulnerable to criminal prosecutions based on the way that they were handling it at the time. Secretary to the Governor, Melissa DeRosa, admitted in her apology to Democratic lawmakers that the reason that they didn't turn over the accurate information on what was going on in the nursing homes is because their request was right around the same time that President Trump was turning the issue into a giant political football, and they were worried that the state legislatures could not be trusted enough not to turn it over to the federal Department of Justice that was looking into the matter. She specifically cites the president tweeting about how Democratic governors are killing people in nursing homes, going after Governor Phil Murphy of New Jersey, Governor Newsom of California, and Governor Whitmer of Michigan as a justification for her hiding this information. And oddly enough, she says that you need to understand the context and pressure that they were under at the time. They couldn't give you this information. They couldn't tell the truth. They couldn't stop other governors from copying these policies, saving the lives of their elderly, because they were under some political pressure.
Where
are you?
I'm in the process of making a point. Where I am. I'm in my basement.
But where are you physically?
I'm in my
you're
basement.
In your basement.
That's what I just said. Yeah, that's where I am.
Oh, you're in your basement. I see. Well, you spend a lot of time there, right? Christina says she sends you there a lot. So kitchen and basement, that's where you spend your life. Okay.
Here's what I'm trying to say. I'm in the basement.
Look, it's insane when you think about what could have happened if just some minor things were changed. If the mainstream media weren't located in New York or weren't located in a blue state, then we might have had dramatically different outcomes, because the state government would not have been the government of everybody that was on TV that they were all watching. If Governor Cuomo's brother wasn't working on CNN, or CNN, had any ethical integrity at all, and they didn't put Chris Cuomo in charge of interviewing Andrew Cuomo on their network doing propaganda for him, we might have had dramatically different results, not just in the state of New York, but across the country with these other states that followed suit based on this positive media coverage. If social media companies didn't decide to go full authoritarian every time there was the pretense of a crisis, we might have been able to spread better information to at least warn people to get their grandparents out of nursing homes. Instead of suppressing that information and telling everybody it was okay, we could have got the word out to people who had relatives that were being lost. And if there was any doubt that there was political pressure that was conflicting with scientific evidence, think about what happened with Rachel Levine, a health secretary in the state of Pennsylvania, and her mother. In the same week that Pennsylvania mandated the same exact policy around nursing homes as Governor Andrew Cuomo, the health secretary decided that that policy is good enough for you, but not good enough for her mother, and she pulled her out of the nursing home in advance because she knew, with her basis in scientific education, that putting elderly people that are positive for COVID in the same area together would lead to disastrous outcomes. But it was good enough for your family, not good enough for hers. And by the way, if you think that she was sanctioned or even prosecuted for telling the public to do one thing while she did something else for her family, just know that Joe Biden actually added her to the federal Department of Health and Human Services as a reward, because among the Democratic Party, you fail up. Now, to be clear, I don't blame Andrew Cuomo for his initial decision based around the nursing home policy, because at the time, we didn't know a lot about the pandemic, and I'm sure he had advisors who made a solid case to him, ultimately leading him down the wrong path. What I blame him for is the cover-up. What I blame him for is not reversing course when it seemed obvious that this policy was backfiring. What I blame is our mainstream media for propping up Andrew Cuomo and making every other governor in this country see him as an example when clearly he was doing something wrong. And just a little bit of investigative reporting during the time could have saved tens of thousands of lives in this country, but our media was just not interested in it. They were interested in telling us about how Orange Man was bad and how Governor DeSantis was really messing it up by outperforming Cuomo in every aspect of his governance. I not only blame the mainstream media, but I blame the social media companies who always choose to suppress information as a solution to problems they think might occur. I also blame the big ticket social media influencers who essentially became mouthpieces for the platforms that they were on because they had to push the science and they had to stop the plebs from, God forbid, sharing information about what was happening to their grandparents in these nursing homes, because that would question official government sources. That would question the experts who admittedly at the beginning of the pandemic all disagreed on everything and didn't know what was going on. They were receiving new information just like the rest of us. They might have been more qualified to interpret that new information, but they were by no means infallible, and treating them as such led to the deaths of tens of thousands of elderly Americans that did not need to die.
This is the normal swab I'm holding up here now for everybody at home. A very valuable object. There's only one company in the entire country that makes these up in Maine. All right, here's the swab. Is it true that this was the swab that the nurse was actually using on you, and that at first it went into your nose and disappeared, so that in scale, this was the actual swab that was being used to fit up that double-barrel shotgun that you have mounted on the front of your pretty face?
But hey, those Andrew and Chris Cuomo segments were hilarious. Remember which one was the favorite and about the pasta sauce? Great stuff all the way, definitely worth the lives of tens of thousands of elderly in this nation. But those are just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like the video, you know what to do. Subscribe for more content. Follow me on the social medias. This has been me talking about the nursing home scandal. Till next time.